for hosting us for this important conversation. The war in Ukraine has global repercussions, which have made food more expensive for consumers and critical supplies like fertilizer and energy inputs more expensive for farmers. I've been working very closely with my colleagues to get the bipartisan America Competes Act through to President Biden's desk, including my Supply Chain Act provision to create an Office of Supply Chain Resiliency and Crisis Response within the Department of Commerce to monitor supply chains of critical goods and materials like those that are necessary to run this farm and to plan for future supply chain disruptions. We must ensure that we're doing everything we can to protect both our consumers and suppliers from future crises like the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused so many headaches and cost so much money for our farmers. Throughout the 2nd Congressional District, I represent over 1,200 family farms, so it's very important to me that President Biden's administration continue working to reduce costs for farmers and to increase production of food and animals we grow here. The President's decision to tap into the Bill Emerson Humanitarian Trust will allow us to provide homegrown commodities like those produced here and across Kankakee to the world's hungry and help bolster our farms along the way. Thank you again to the O'Connor family for having us, and I look forward to hearing more about your work. And with that, I'd like to introduce Secretary Vilsack. Thank you.
Congressman, thank you very, very much. And to the O'Connor family, thank you very much for this opportunity to see a tremendous operation. And, Mr. President, as you know, and perhaps very few people in this country fully appreciate, food and agriculture is a big business. It helps to employ 29 million of Americans across this country. It's 7% of our gross domestic product. And it is, in fact, the vehicle through which we become a food secure nation. So, folks, this is the reason why the President of the United States pays attention to agriculture and to food. It's why he directed me during the course of the early years and days of the administration to focus on exports, because we know Jeff and his family depend on exports. Opening up those ports and making sure that we got those empty containers filled with agricultural products in export markets. It's why he understood that to bring the cost of gas down, you also have to expand the supply, which is why it's important to support biofuels. And he instructed me to do $700 million of pandemic assistance to help that industry and $100 million to expand the infrastructure. It's why he understood and appreciated that farmers need a fair price and consumers need a fair price. And that's why it's important to expand capacity and competition, which is why we are focused on not only strengthening the Packers and Stockyards Act, but also investing in processing capacity. It's also the reason why he is concerned about the stresses that families across the country have, especially those who are struggling. It's why he instructed me to look for ways in which we could increase nutrition assistance to families in this country. But my main job here today is to introduce Jeff. You know, I've known Jeff for 20 minutes. Here's what I know about him. He is incredibly committed to the land. He understands his responsibilities as a steward of that land. He's appreciative of the importance of investing in soil health and water quality. I know that to be a fact. I know that he believes that Gina is a partner in this operation, because no farm family does it with a single farmer. It's an entire family operation. I know that he's committed to making sure that the next generation and the next generation and the next generation have that opportunity that he now enjoys. That's what I know about Jeff. He's committed to his family, he's committed to his community, and he's committed to his country, and he's extraordinarily proud of what farmers do here in this country, of feeding a food-secure nation, but also providing food all over the world. Not bad for 20 minutes. The reason I know this is because Jeff is a farmer. And when you say that Jeff is a farmer, it tells you not just who he is, but what he is. So it is my pleasure to introduce and use the very simple introduction. Jeff O'Connor, an American farmer.
Thank you, Secretary Vilsack. You would think with credentials that go back 20 minutes, I would have been allowed to make an introductory remark that didn't have to be scripted, but they didn't want me to do that, so I'm just going to read mine. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I cannot express enough how grateful I am that you all took time out of your schedule to do this. I'm Jeff O'Connor. My wife, Gina, and I are pleased to welcome all of you to our farm. We just had the honor of showing President Biden around our farm and talking with him about the critical role American farmers play in not just keeping grocery store shelves stocked for the American people, but also in feeding the entire world. I applaud President Biden's efforts to place a spotlight on the global food challenges created by the Ukraine conflict right now. I also applaud his eagerness to work hand in hand with farmers to make healthy, high-quality food affordable and accessible for people everywhere. About 10 years ago, Gina and I had the opportunity to travel to both the Dominican Republic and Uganda on Christian mission trips. And we've been able to see what global hunger looks like firsthand and what real water concerns looks like. It leaves a lifelong impression. Nationwide, the farming community takes pride in the role that we can play to help in feeding the world and creating cleaner water. And we support President Biden's efforts to provide additional tools and flexibilities that will allow the American farmer to step up at a very critical time. One point of our discussion was the potential expanded use of double cropping. This would allow the production of soybeans after a summer wheat harvest. In essence, we have the ability to raise two crops in one growing season while simultaneously providing conservation benefits. These efforts need to be maximized. I appreciate both the President's and Secretary Vilsack's commitment to conservation and the creation of the tools of the administration is providing to invest in climate-smart agriculture, which I support and I practice. Mr. President, we are very honored to have you here, and the farming community stands ready to maximize production, which we do so well in this time of world need. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please give a warm Illinois welcome to President Joe Biden.
This one working? There you go. Please sit down. One of the things I want to put to rest, everybody looks at me and says, have you ever been on a farm? And I remind them that what nobody knows. I come from the state of Delaware. I represented Delaware for 36 years in the United States Senate before I became vice president. Single largest industry in Delaware and the Delmarva, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia Peninsula, that peninsula that goes down, is agriculture. It's a $4 billion industry. $4 billion, that whole peninsula. And we have more chickens than there are Americans, more broilers. And so, you know, I've been very, let me put it this way. If I didn't know something about farms, I'd have been a United States Senator for 6 years, not 36 years. But every part of the country is different. Every part of the country is different. But before I go on, I want to pay a little bit of a tribute to this guy right here. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. This is the man who happens to be the son of the owners of this farm. And this guy is doing, you know, there's an old expression, God made man, then he made a few firefighters. Not a joke. Firefighters are incredible. Who's else crazy enough to run into flames, you know? But all kidding aside, what you're doing in terms of helping conservation as well out in Wyoming is astounding. It really is. I've been to, I don't want to make you stand, I'm sorry. But the whole point of my raising this is, and we're not going to be able to talk much about it today, but conservation is also pretty darn important, and climate is pretty important. I've been to every major fire but 2 this year because FEMA is working again. We show up. We don't wait. We don't have to wonder. Governors only have to call me once. And here's the deal. More timber, more land, more buildings, more territory has been burned to the ground this year than an entire state of New Jersey, from New York all the way down to Virginia. The entire state of New Jersey. And so what this young man does and is amazing, what they do, and it relates to lack of water in most of the places. I've flown over those reservoirs that were 200 feet deep that are now 2 inches deep, literally, not figuratively. So one of these days I want to come back and talk to you all about conservation as well and the climate. But thank you for what you're doing, man. I really mean it. Thank you. Folks, I know it's hot in here, so I'm not going to talk more than an hour and a half. Look, I want to make a few, I think, are fairly important points. First of all, I want to thank Jeff for that introduction and you, Gina, for your hospitality you've extended today. I joined Congressman Robin Kelly here, the real champion for working families and farmers who represents this area, and I just do what she says. She sends a note to the White House, and I get it done. No, but she's a key player in infrastructure, getting high-speed internet, clean water to every person across this district. And I know we wanted to be here also was Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, but they were going to come, but there's a vote today in the United States Senate, and they're unable to be here. They're two of the most genuine, reliable people I've ever worked with, and I've been doing this for a few days. And I want to thank Tom Vilsack. Tom and I became friends when Tom was governor in Iowa. We traveled the state. Tom has forgotten more about farming than most people will ever learn. I'm sure this room knows as much. But the idea, Tom talks about how critically important that agriculture is to the United States in every single solitary way. But the real reason I'm here is to thank American farmers. Thank farmers. You feed America. You got us through a pandemic. And you're literally the backbone of our country. It's not hyperbole. But you also feed the world. And we're seeing with Putin's war in Ukraine, you're like the backbone of freedom. You know, I was at a factory not long ago, 8 days ago, down in Alabama. And they make Javelin missiles to help the Ukrainians stave off the Russians, beat them back in their aggression. And I pointed out that the proof point that America is the arsenal of democracy, that's what they are. We always have been. We've been the arsenal of democracy. I stand here today to thank American farmers who are the breadbasket of democracy. You really are. You know, we talk about, you know, every investment banker could leave their job. If every farmer left, we'd all starve to death. You know, let's talk about what's important. All these jobs are important. But I just think about it. Right now, America's fighting on two fronts. At home, it's inflation and rising prices. Abroad, it's helping Ukrainians defend their democracy and feeding those who are left hungry around the world because Russian atrocities exist. And Jeff and the American farmers understand Putin's war has cut off critical sources of food. Ukraine was the world's largest producer of wheat and corn and cooking oil, but wheat the largest. For example, Ukraine says they have 20 million tons of grain in their silos right now. 20 million tons. And guess what? If those tons don't get to market, an awful lot of people in Africa are going to starve to death because they are the sole supplier of a number of African countries. Somalia, I won't go through them all. But the point is this, that because of what the Russians are doing in the Black Sea, Putin has warships, battleships, preventing the access to Ukrainian ports to get this grain out, to get this wheat out. The brutal war launched on Ukrainian soil has prevented Ukrainian farmers from planting next year's crop and next year's harvest. And they're not doing too darn well in Russia either. Russia's the second largest producer. But we're doing something about it. And our farmers are helping on both fronts, reducing the cost of price of food at home and expanding production and feeding the world in need. You know, I just toured Jeff's beautiful family farm. 800 acres of soybeans, corn, and wheat. We talked about farmers all across America, what they're experiencing today. In addition to Putin's war in Ukraine, it's been cold and wet this spring, like it is cold today. We waited for 90-degree weather until I showed up here. But look, many farmers in the Midwest have been put behind the 8 ball because of that. But it kept them from getting into their fields and planting crops. But as Jeff just shared, American farmers always find a way. They always feel something extra, a spark of patriotism. That's not hyperbole. A spark of patriotism, a sense of never giving up, of always finding a solution. To all our farmers, I want you to know, your congresswoman, me, your secretary, my cabinet, we have your back. Robin has your back. She's always looking at what's going on in the agricultural world. For example, we're reducing the red tape so it's easier for farmers to conserve inputs and double crop. For folks at home who don't know what double cropping means, harvesting two different crops from the same field in the same year. And that's what Jeff does with wheat and soybeans, which America is the top producer of, soybeans. And wheat will be harvested around July 4th if all goes well, God willing, and the creek not rising, as my grandfather would say. But look, then you plant soybeans in the same acreage. And he'll tell you, double cropping comes with some real risks. Growing season for wheat is short, and if the weather conditions aren't ideal or aren't at least good, or there are other disruptions, then the timing of everything is thrown off. But it's a risk we need to take. That's why my administration is looking at how to extend crop insurance coverage to give financial security to farmers like Jeff who practice double cropping. Secondly, I want to also, farmers worried about rising fertilizer costs and what is the content of the fertilizer. That's why earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced it would invest $250 million to boost fertilizer production. Literally on the plane out here on Air Force One, I turned to Tom and I said, Tom, double that. Make it $500 million. It's so desperately needed. We can't take chances. It's critical to get this done. Now, when we leave here today, I'm heading up to Chicago. You know where Tom's going? He's heading to the airport when we get to Air Force One. He's heading to Germany, to the G7. That is all the democracies in Europe getting together and their agricultural teams getting together. North America, Europe, and Asia, they're all part of it. And to solve some really big problems. They're going to see what actions we can take to increase fertilizer supplies globally and identify how we can work together to prevent export restrictions on food and agricultural inputs and bring more global production to market, which will stabilize prices and bring more certainty to our farmers and keep people from dying of hunger. You know, this bill's in other ways as well. My administration has been working to drive down the cost to farmers, and Tom mentioned it a little bit, and prices to consumers. To reduce gas prices last month, I was in Iowa, at a biofuel processing plant, and I announced an emergency waiver to allow E15 gasoline to be sold across America during the summer. It's an extraordinary effort, but it had to be done for this summer. E15 uses more ethanol on crops grown here in Illinois and elsewhere around the country. And it can reduce the cost of a gallon of gasoline at the pump by 10 cents per gallon. Every little bit matters. I know it's a big deal, and Robin is a big supporter of this, and she's pushing it in the House as well. Only 4 big companies, by the way, control more than half the markets for beef, pork, and poultry. Without meaningful competition, our farmers and ranchers have to pay whatever the 4 big retailers say they'll pay for their chickens, their hogs, and their cattle. These big companies can use their position as middlemen to overcharge grocery stores and ultimately families. Just consider this. 50 years ago, ranchers got over 60 cents on every dollar spent to produce the beef they raise. Today, they get 39 cents. 50 years ago, hog farmers got 40 to 60 cents for each dollar the family spent raising that hog. Today, it's about 19 cents. And as the big companies made massive profits, the prices you see at the grocery stores have gone up, and the prices farmers receive has gone down. This reflects a market distorted by the lack of competition. So last year, I signed, one of the first executive orders I signed was that the competition, to make competition more available and level the playing field. And though through the American Rescue Plan, we're investing about $1 billion to help smaller meat processors expand their capacity, give farmers, ranchers, and consumers more options, and at better prices. Look, I'm a capitalist, but capitalism without competition is not capitalism. It's exploitation. It's exploitation. Folks, we can make sure that American agriculture exports will make up for the gap in Ukrainian supplies. In fact, during my first year in office, American agriculture exports shattered all previous records. $177 billion last year alone. I remind people, my predecessor did not come close. By traveling in our, we have to keep investing in our farmers to reduce the cost, to reduce prices to consumers, and have the most productive, most efficient farmers in the world here in the United States. We've always combined generations of know-how with cutting-edge technology to feed us and the world. And I'm going to keep fighting for family farmers like Jeff so they can do what they do best. Hope Congress is going to join me. I know Robin's going to fight like hell to have it happen, and working hard to invest in farmers like Jeff and feed America and the world. That's what we have to do. Let me close with this. Look at the family farms like this one as a reminder of the bounty, beauty, and generosity of this nation. I know this, and you're tired of hearing me say this for the last 2 years. It's never, ever, I was in the Tibetan Plateau with Xi Jinping. I traveled with him and spent more time with him than any other world leader has in China. And he said, he was talking about, well, America's a diminishing power. And I said, Mr. President, it's never been a good bet to bet against the American people. No one's ever won betting against the American people. And I said, and by the way, you asked, he went on and said, can you define America for me? Just me and a translator and him and a translator, simultaneous translation. By the way, I turned all my notes over to the State Department. It matters. But, you know, what happened was he said, can you define America for me? And this is God's truth because it's been quoted 1,000 times now. I said, yes, one word, possibilities. We're the only nation in the world that has come out of every crisis stronger than we went in it. Every single time, regardless of what it was. No other nation has done that. It's one of the reasons why in some places we're called the ugly Americans. We think we can do anything. We know we can do anything. We know. This nation leads the world. We stand up for freedom. We're the United States of America. And when we are united, there's not a damn thing we can't do. It's not hyperbole. It's a fact. As a student of history, it's a fact. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we work together. Nothing. So I'm here to say, God bless our farmers. And I mean this sincerely. God protect our firefighters. And may God protect our troops. Thank you for what you do. America owes you. They owe you big.